All right. Hello and welcome to today's meeting of the Finance Committee. This meeting is being held virtually by Zoom and live streamed to YouTube for the public. And as such, all audio and video is being recorded and captured. Before we get started, I wanted to announce that as the new chair of the council and per the bylaws, I am now an ex officio voting member of the council effective May 13th. I'm also going to serve as chair of this committee until I designate that role to another member. At Friday's meeting, I'll make additional appointments, but for the council members attending today in the non-voting role, thank you for doing so. Heather, will you please call the roll?
I will. Mr. Colby Burks, Mr. Eric Ferris.
Here.
Mr. Lucas Minzer.
Here.
Mr. Richard Nelson.
Here.
Dr. Robert Statt.
Here.
Ms. Carol Wright. Okay, we have 2 absent, but we still have a quorum. And then I see that Ms. Doris Thomas and Mr. Madison Silver have also joined us today. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you all. So the meeting minutes from the May 11th meeting are in the materials. Are there any objections to those as presented?
Move to approve. Second.
I heard Dr. Statt move to approve. Who is the second? Eric Ferris. Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, minutes pass. Excellent. So next up, we have the campus tuition and mandatory fee proposal. And for this, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Bill Payne. Bill, take it away.
Dr. Bill Payne.
Dr. Bill
Thank
Payne.
you, Chair Minzer, President Thompson, and members of the committee. Good morning, everyone. We have received a 2021-22 tuition and mandatory fee proposal from every campus, 8 universities and KCTCS. Staff has reviewed those proposals. We've determined that they comply with the council adopted ceilings, which you approved at your May 13 meeting. But just to remind everyone what those parameters were that you adopted. Next slide. Heather, are you doing the slides or is Sean?
Sean is doing those.
Okay, Sean. Okay. So this is what was adopted at the May 13th meeting. Resident undergraduate tuition and fee ceilings that equate to a maximum base rate increase of no more than 3% over 2 years and no more than 2% in any 1 year. And that was for the public universities. And then at KCTCS institutions, a maximum base rate increase of no more than $5 per credit hour over 2 years and no more than $3 per credit hour in any 1 year. And as you will recall from the May 13th meeting, we defined base rates as total tuition and fee charges minus any special use fees or asset preservation fees previously approved by the council, also minus the Build Smart agency bond fee at KCTCS. And the reason that we deduct those fees before we apply the percent increase parameter is to keep those fees fixed as we move forward in time until they expire. Also at the May 13th meeting, the council adopted non-resident tuition and fees that comply with the council's tuition and mandatory fee policy or an existing MOU between the council and the institution. And then finally, institutions are allowed to submit for council review and approval market competitive tuition and fees for graduate and online courses. Next slide, Sean. Okay, what this slide is showing is the current year base rate. And these are the base rates after deducting those special use fees and asset preservation fees and the Build Smart fee at KCTCS. You can see the current year 2021 base rates for each institution, what they're proposing for next year, and then the dollar and the percent change. And I would like to point out that we've got 2 institutions, KSU and KCTCS, that are proposing to keep tuition the same. In other words, a 0% increase parameter for next year. We've got 3 institutions, the University of Kentucky, Murray State University, and Northern Kentucky University. They're going to keep tuition increases right around the 1% increase level. So all of these proposed rates for resident undergraduate students comply with the council's parameter. None of these proposed increases are more than 2% in this upcoming year. And at KCTC, as I've already said, they're proposing no increase, which is obviously less than the $3 credit hour parameter adopted by the council. Next slide, Sean. We did want to go ahead and show you the total tuition and fees comparison after you add back in the special use fees and asset preservation fees. And so these totals on this page do include those three categories of fees that we've mentioned previously. And the system average increase for this upcoming year, if these proposed tuition and fees are approved by the Finance Committee and the full council, will be a 1.2% system average increase for resident undergraduate students. And just to give you some indication of how that compares, next slide, Sean. Most of you, I think, have seen this slide before. Excuse me. What this slide is showing is the percent increase from the prior year in resident undergraduate tuition and fees. The vertical green line in between 2010 and 2011 indicates the year in which the council began adopting either annual or biannual tuition and fee ceilings. As you can see near the top of the graph on the left-hand side of the page, the average annual growth rate over an 8-year period to the left of that green line was close to 11% increase per year on average at the system level. And to the right of that green line, you can see that the impact of the tuition and fee ceilings has reduced that annual growth rate considerably, average annual growth rate to 3.7%. In the bottom right-hand corner of this graph, you can see the current year increase was the lowest in over 20 years, of 0.7% increase. And then highlighted in red, the red bar shows the system average increase as proposed by the institutions for 2021-22. So does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, Sean, next slide. So what are we recommending today? What is staff's recommendation? Well, first of all, we've reviewed all of the proposals, and as I said at the outset, they do comply with the resident undergraduate parameters established by the council. Institutions are submitting market competitive rates for graduate and online tuition. The institutional governing boards at every institution have reviewed these proposals and approved them for their respective institutions, with the exception of the University of Louisville, who is their board is meeting tomorrow to review and hopefully approve the proposal that we've got before you today. And we're going to ask that you go ahead and approve U of L's proposed rates contingent on that board approval tomorrow. But our recommendation is that the Finance Committee approve and endorse to the full council the proposed tuition and fee rates as submitted by the universities and by KCTCS, and as approved by the respective governing boards.
Thank you, Bill.
Discussion.
Do we need a motion before we do discussion? Yeah. Okay. So on the table is a motion. I need a motion to pass the proposal on the table presented by Bill Payne. Do I have a motion?
Luke,
So moved.
Okay, second.
Go ahead.
This is Richard.
Yeah. So now I think we can have discussion. So Richard?
Yeah, no, I was just going to move that we approve the proposed tuition and fee rates. So, yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm looking back at the graph showing how we're continually reducing tuition, that particular one, yes. And the schools aren't getting as much tuition increases or coming in. They're also, many of the schools are dropping head counts. So that's also impacting the budgets. I haven't had a chance to look at the individual school budgets, but are they going down also, or how are they making up the differences?
Dr. Stad, I can answer part of that. I mean, it depends on the school, right? UK's budget was one of the largest budgets ever presented, maybe the largest budget ever presented, but it was done less on state dollars. It was done in other ways, right? And UK can do that probably. Other schools are reducing their budgets and their forecasts because of declining enrollment. That you're pointing out in a big picture, really an interesting issue that we probably don't have time to discuss today because, I mean, the base inflation rate is about 2.4%. So even if everything was even, you know, in this case, they were still having to figure out how to manage the budget. Now, the federal stimulus dollars helped in some areas this time, no doubt about it. Not as completely as the campus would like, because there's a lot of general fund things they can't do with it. The issue that we have to consider down the road, and maybe as a council, or at least discuss, you know, how do we make sure that, this is the prerogative of the campuses, obviously, but the idea that we keep those wraparound services for the students to keep increasing student success. Because a lot of times when you have to make up efficiencies, especially after 13 years of budget cuts, thank goodness we got some this past time, you're going to have to figure it out from somewhere, right? So there is a concern that I have, heavy concern about the declining college going rate, the effects that COVID will even have on that, and some of the other issues. So these are the discussions the presidents and I and others are having all the time. So the budget is one that the campus has really said, well, we're at probably a limit about where we can go for our families and students. However, many are concerned whether or not this is going to have an overall impact on the things they can provide.
The one thing I would add to that, Dr. Stat, is that as President Thompson just mentioned, many of our institutions are having to make up the reduced level of resources in the way of institutional efficiencies. And as President Thompson indicated, UK is one of the few institutions that has continued to have a growing enrollment over the past 5 to 6 years. But in my mind, what this really does is it puts the onus back on the General Assembly and the governor to do what they did for 2021-22, which is to provide some new funding for higher education, because there's only so many years that institutions can make up for a lack of resources through institutional efficiency, and it's going to start to have a detrimental effect on the quality of the academic programs that those institutions provide. And so we really need to make the case this coming November for the legislature and the governor to continue that momentum and continue to provide some new funding for higher education in Kentucky.
If I can be of any value in helping get that, call on me.
Yes, sir.
I had a question just to help me understand on these E&G fixed costs that were referenced in the executive summary. I noted that KSU was remarkable to be able to keep their tuition level, but they showed an 11% increase in those costs, which seemed somewhat higher than the others. And NKU was at 6% more. Can you help me understand why those might be a little bit more than what the others seem to be on average?
Well, unless President Thompson's going to jump in, I know what's going on with Northern Kentucky University. They're the only comprehensive university that is choosing to buy out of the Kentucky retirement system. And so some of those additional costs are going to be the net increase resulting, from additional debt service and some of the payouts in terms of buying out of that Kentucky retirement system. And Sean, do you have any information about Kentucky State University? I know they had planned some salary increases for faculty and staff, but I don't know if that explains everything that's going on at KSU.
I think part of what we're seeing is that these numbers were collected in March, and so it's before cost-cutting measures have been taken into consideration, and so I think that's why you see such a large increase at KSU. A 10% increase in cost is just not sustainable. And
Sean, do you know were they including any of the COVID-19 cost increases in their E&G fixed cost numbers?
We asked that institutions not include those numbers. I know they had a pretty sizable M&O increase as part of their figures, and so that might be an expression of a desire to do some asset preservation projects that are probably very needed. I know that the General Assembly did commit some $5 million in roofing projects at KSU for the upcoming year. So maybe that will have an effect of reducing that M&O piece. So a 10% increase at KSU, I believe that was a $4 million increase, and I believe that the M&O increase was about half of that, and the salary piece was maybe $1.5 million, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah,
let me jump in and say, Brian, unless you have more information, I have a little more. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I actually have the file pulled up here right now. And first, just to be specific, the M&O, so the non-personnel costs, maintenance and operations that Sean was speaking to, the dollar change will be about 1.9 million just in that category alone, which is 11% increase from the prior year. And then E&G salaries and wages. So the pay raises that Bill was referring to as well is about 1.7 million, which is also 11% from the prior year. So that is the vast majority of that overall $4.4 million increase.
That's helpful. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I was going to say most of this is personnel. Personnel and some other costs that they incur through maybe some legal and some other items. But the item you have to remember here, KSU's budget is so small, that big of a percentage is really not that big of a dollar by comparison to like a Northern who's dealing with with the pension issue. But KSU's real E&G increase is around personnel.
Thank you all.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So we had a motion by Dr. Stadt and a second by Mr. Nelson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. All right. Motion passes. Thank you all very much. Dr. Payne, thank you very much for this carefully crafted presentation. We appreciate that. Next item on the topic is the Interstate Tuition Reciprocity Agreement with Indiana, Ohio, and West Virginia. And for this one, we're going to turn it over to Sean. Sean, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. We covered these agreements pretty extensively at the last meeting. We had all of the information, but we hadn't gotten a final buy-off from our partner states at that time. But we have received that official agreement from our partners in other states. All of these agreements must be renewed for the next academic year, which starts July 1st. And as our chair pointed out, Indiana, Ohio, and West Virginia agreements all need to be renewed. In our mind, only minor changes were requested, and there have been no new changes since our last Finance Committee meeting. And as a reminder, the changes discussed for the Kentucky-Indiana agreement included adding Elizabethtown Community Technical College and 3 Indiana counties to the list of approved counties and institutions. Also adding Henry County, Kentucky to the list of eligible counties for IU Southeast. And then in Ohio, the agreement as revised would allow Kentucky residents to be eligible for applied bachelor's degrees programs in Ohio. And then kind of on the flip side, applied bachelor degree holders from Ohio would be eligible for NKU bachelor's degree programs. So just pretty minor kind of changes, and the Kentucky West Virginia agreement is just strictly a renewal, no substantive changes, and a smaller number of students participate in that program, as you can see. Staff recommends that the Finance Committee approve and endorse the full council the proposed tuition reciprocity agreements with Indiana, Ohio, and West Virginia.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Nelson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ferris. Okay, any discussion? All right, not hearing any discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean. All right, next topic. Heather has the proposed meeting dates for the next few months. If we get that put up. There we go. All right. So there's the proposed dates for the next few months up here on the screen. Please check your calendars and let her know if those conflict with your availability. Otherwise, she'll get those finalized and sent out in the next week. And we'll look at the scheduling for the 2022 committee meeting dates later this fall. So if you're wondering. Any questions on that topic?
Lucas, will these be primarily in person in Frankfurt?
My preference would be they would be in person. I don't think we've talked about the location yet, but I think we can lock that down here soon. Heather, do you have any comments on that?
We are trying to move to always have an in-person, I think, starting after this June meeting. But no matter what, I will always have a teleconferencing option for those, especially who live far away. So we'd love to see your faces, but I try to make it as, flexible as I can.
And we at CPE as a whole, we're going to move back to as much in person as people can handle, I guess. But the idea that COVID has taught us how to be a little more technology savvy. So we'll always have a teleconferencing option for almost everything we do, or Zoom or whatever kind of format we're using.
And Heather, I would like to just comment quickly that October 28th date, one reason that's vitally important is because the council's biennial budget recommendation is due by November 15th. And it's hard to believe because just this past November, we sort of did an interim post-secondary education priorities budget that we submitted to the governor and the General Assembly because they were doing the 2021-22 budget. But now, between now and that September 2nd meeting, but certainly before we get to the October 28th meeting, we've got to have all those meetings and those discussions between me and my staff and the campus chief budget officers, between President Thompson and the campus presidents. And then, of course, we will be updating you on those discussions. And then hopefully at that October 28th meeting, we will be bringing staff's recommendation for the 2022-2024 biennium in terms of the post-secondary education budget priorities.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. All right. Is there any other business for today? Any other questions, comments? Okay. If not, we can consider this meeting adjourned, and we'll see each other this upcoming Friday. I look forward to seeing everybody in person.
See you.
Thanks.
See everyone. Bye.
Be
Thanks,
safe,
everyone.
everybody. Enjoy this beautiful day if you can. I'm in meetings all the time, so I can't. So just do it for me, okay?
I'll look out